Right, let's move on to what I wanted to start with before this blew up. And that's this appalling terror attack in Sydney on Bondi Beach. Emily, let me start with you on this. It's got to be a scary time to be Jewish right now. You know, let's park to one side, and other members of the panel won't want to do this, but let's park the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas to one side for a moment. There are 15 million Jews in the world, and when you see the rising volume of attacks on Jewish people because they're Jewish, this has got to be a scary time. And I think that should be recognized. What do you feel?
First and foremost, I feel privileged as an American. That maybe call me ignorant, call me naive. I just still feel very safe as a Jew under Trump's administration. I don't have that privilege overseas. I'm very aware of my surroundings when I travel. Australia is a place of no travel for me because of the failure that we witnessed take fold yesterday. I feel like this could have been prevented. I feel that it was warned multiple times by multiple people. They begged the government at that point to do the one job they're supposed to do, which is to protect its citizens. But yeah, the rise of anti-Semitism, and you mentioned to park the war in Gaza for a moment. Let's park that for this whole conversation, because I don't care what you think of that war. There is no justification. There's no reason for mowing down Jews, gunning down Jews, murdering Jews at all because you don't agree with the war. Because you have to remember, there are people who have the opposing view from you on that war, and the violence is a two-way street. But it seems like the bullets, when it comes to persecution, really only go towards the Jews in this case, and I'd like to see all of the bullets stop as a whole. But what happened in Australia was so easily preventable. And it's so sad, Pierce, that we cannot even celebrate Hanukkah without spending tens of thousands of dollars on security, because we are scared that there's going to be someone who's likely an immigrant from another country gunning down Jews.
But, you know,
so the last point I'll make before we open it to the panel is Australia's biggest failure was the mass immigration from countries and the failure to vet them, because I'm not against immigration. I think immigrants contribute a lot to every society. But I just found out that the shooters were previously investigated for ties to ISIS. How about this? The fact that you needed to prompt the investigation was enough to turn them away as immigrants. But nope, they welcomed them. You saw on October 8th, the protests that they did in Sydney and all over Melbourne, October 8th, Pierce, Israel had not retaliated yet, chanting, globalize the Intifada, death to the, whatever they were cheering, it doesn't even matter. They were calling for violence, and anyone who supports that should be a litmus test as to where your country stands in its safety.
Okay, Cheng, let me bring you in here. This is complicated by one fact, but it's a salient fact to the whole debate about the narrative that many have, which is that, you know, the creeping Islamification, if you like, of the West has been the major problem here, that there are way too many Muslims living in Western countries with a different culture, that many are prone to violence, and that's what we've seen here. But the guy that saved so many lives, Ahmed, turned out himself to be a Muslim immigrant from Syria. So by the yardstick of keep them all out, you would also have to keep out the guy who saved many lives and has become not just a national hero in Australia, where he's been a citizen since 2006, I think, but has become a global hero. I mean, several $1 million already been raised in a GoFundMe for him, including people like Bill Ackman, leading Jewish figures in the United States. So this is a complex story because it's not easily dismissed as the way many would like it to be, which is you've got two obviously radicalized extremists, a father and son, who the father had legally 6 firearms, was a member of a hunting club. Australia, for those who don't know, had a terrible mass shooting back in the mid-90s in Hobart and Tasmania. 35 people were killed. As a result, they did some of the most draconian new gun laws anywhere in the world, and it had a dramatic effect on reducing gun violence in Australia. They also had nearly 1 million guns handed back in to the government under a buyback program that was very successful. So this has been a real shock to the system in Australia because they're simply, rather like my country, not used to gun violence. You know, there is 580 times, I know this because Emily asked me about this statistic in relation to guns on X earlier when we were talking about this, because I don't think you can ignore the gun part either. And I said, look, the bottom line is, Australia has a population of 27 million, America 340 million, but the amount of gun violence in America proportionate to Australia is 580 times worse. 18,000 murders in 2023 in Australia in the same year-long period from June 23 to June 24, 31 gun murders. It's not even, there's no comparison to be made that makes any sense. So my point, I think, Cenk, is if you come from a school of you've got to kick all the Muslims out, then you've got to kick out al-Ahmad when he tries to come in from Syria, yet he's the national hero here. And so it's not as simple as that. There are many good Muslims. There are bad radicalized Muslims. You can take the same yardstick to every other religion, right? So this is my problem. And I think Emily and I, we agreed on something you posted earlier. I'm sorry, Cenk, for the rant here, but I do think it was really important. Emily recognized that it's always wrong in these situations to just blame a religion. It's just wrong. Whatever that religion is, you can't blame a billion people for the actions of two ISIS radicalized nut jobs on a beach in Sydney. Over to you, Cenk.
Yeah. So there are two different issues here. The issue of violence is the relatively straightforward one. So everyone should condemn the violence. Everyone should condemn violent extremists. So I don't know anyone who hasn't, and they'd be monsters if they didn't. So those poor victims there, the 15 people who were killed and the others that were injured, and everyone who was traumatized by it, they didn't deserve that at all. They had nothing to do with any government policy. They were just innocent human beings. So now, if, our position has been very consistent for nonviolence and against killing on both sides. Now, the second issue is propaganda. So when any Muslim extremist that's two guys out of 1.6 billion people do it, there is a concerted effort by some, and yes, including Israelis, to say it's all Muslims, it's all Muslims, it's all Muslims. You should hate them. You should kick them out of your countries. They all think this way. And honestly, that kind of propaganda is disgusting. And if we did it to the other side, which we would never, and we said things like it's all the Jews, that would be horrific, right? No one would tolerate that. But when the other side does it, and if you don't think they do it, just go on social media. There are thousands, maybe millions of comments. And yes, about 3 months ago, all of the Israel First pundits started changing, and they literally said, I tweeted about it. One of their influencers was like, it's hard to get the Americans to like Israel. There really is no reason to like Israel and support Israel. But it is easier to get them to hate Muslims. So we should do a propaganda. Now, she didn't say propaganda, to be fair, but she said we should do a campaign to highlight how much Muslims are bad. And now when we talk about violence, we ask for the same kind of decency. Can we not kill 70,000 people in Gaza, 20,000 kids? But the Israelis say, no, we're allowed to kill 20,000 kids. And no one should be able to condemn that. But but every Muslim on planet Earth have to condemn these lunatics as if these lunatics represent us. There's also lunatics in every religion and every race, and we lock them up because they're violent and we can't stand violence. And by the way, last thing, if you're on the left and you're part of the peace movement, our whole ethos is nonviolence. So if you do violence, you betray us all. It is immoral, it is unintelligent, it is deeply counterproductive, and it is used by our enemies to further discriminate against Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, etc. So it is the single worst thing you could do, but mainly, obviously, because of the deep immorality of killing innocent people.
Okay, Gillian,
Cenk, I think it's very immoral that you couldn't just take one conversation about a shooting in Australia without comparing it to a war in Gaza. There's a difference between celebrating a religious holiday on the beach and, thank God, Hamas losing a very nasty war in the Middle East. But if you want to start equivocating Middle Eastern violence
there is a difference.
to what
70,000
Western
more
civilizations
dead.
practice,
So
you don't want to go down that road.
celebrate 70,000 dead? I find you deeply
and let me tell you
immoral.
something where
I've
you're
always
wrong,
found
Cenk,
you
you were
immoral
wrong.
because you think that
First of all,
Palestinian
correct
Muslim
yourself.
lives don't matter.
You said,
You're a sick
let me
person.
speak. You said You said every Israeli says it's all the Muslims. Let me just correct one fact for you. Every
Not
time
every
an Israeli is
Every
killed in
pro-Israeli
Israel,
pundit
it
like
is
you.
at the hands of a Muslim. And nonetheless, I still don't blame the entire religion as a whole. But that's just the fact of the matter in Israel. So for once in your life, if you
so
could just
generous.
focus on the victims without jealous of what exactly? Jealous of what? We all have our problems.
I said
but for
generous.
5 minutes of your life,
You're so
Cenk,
generous for
do
not hating every single
do not
Muslim.
Have Israel
You just are in
derangement
favor of
syndrome
murdering
for 5 minutes of your
70,000 in
life
Gaza and
and just
stealing
mourn
their
the
land.
victims
All
and
right,
call
let me
it what
bring
it
in-
is. Call a spade a spade.
All right,
you
let
don't
me
have to compare everything to the war in
Do you
Gaza. It's
mourn
very
the 20,000 dead kids? Simple question. Simple question. Do you mourn the
Yes,
dead
every single
20,000
child that
Palestinian
dies
kids?
is a disaster.
So
I do.
why
and
are
I
you
said this
celebrating
200
Israel doing it?
times, Cenk. I said I am
So
celebrating
Israel is wrong.
Let me
Israel
tell you,
is
Cenk,
brutal
if Israel
terrorist
had
killers.
lost the war, there
Israel
would
is
be
wrong.
a genocide on
Say
the
it.
Jewish people as a whole. I'm happy Israel's
No,
winning this
there
war.
is no
The fact
genocide
that
of the
20,000
Israelis.
kids
There's
are
only a
dead,
genocide of the
again, is still
Palestinians,
Hamas's
and you won't
fault.
condemn it.
You
Condemn
can
the genocide.
tattoo it on
Are
your
you condemning
forehead.
Israel for
It's
murdering
Hamas's fault that
20,000
all
kids?
these children are dead.
All right,
And
hang on.
nonetheless, it's
condemning
Hamas.
Israel for murdering
We've got three other
20,000
panelists.
No, I'm
kids?
We have three
condemning
other
Hamas for
panelists.
starting the war.
Guys.
I'm
Of course
condemning
not.
Hamas
Yes,
for
of
starting
course
the
not.
Guys,
war.
I think we can be crystal clear on the genocide point. There's no doubt that Hamas would
There's
love
no
to be
genocide.
genocidal.
Hamas would do a genocide.
They talk in a genocidal
Correct.
language. I don't think there's much doubt about that. Gillian, let me bring you in here. All right, so we're right into
Israel's
this.
actually doing a genocide. Actually doing it. Not
Okay.
a
In your
theoretical
mind,
one,
Cenk,
not a
move on.
hypothetical
And
one.
Hamas killed
No, I'm not moving on
Hamas
from
killed as
murdering
many
20,000
Israelis.
kids.
Hamas killed as many Israelis
Good.
as they could
Blame
possibly
Hamas.
kill on October the 7th in a genocidal rampage. So let's not compare genocide with genocide. I want to bring in Gillian.
Israel's civilian kill ratio is worse than Hamas.
All right,
They're
let me
bigger
bring in-
terrorist
It wouldn't
group than
kill you
Hamas.
to
Let
just
me
mourn
bring
the
in
damn
Gillian,
victims
please.
and not bring up
Let me bring in
Gaza.
Gillian, please. Gillian, you've been waiting very patiently.
Yes.
Thank you. Look,
Okay.
let's focus back for a moment because
I'm gonna
there
read
were,
a book
there
while
were
y'all
many,
argue.
many attacks going on Jewish people before October the 7th. All right, so let's be clear about that. This has been a rising problem of anti-Semitism across the world, and there are not many Jewish people in the world. There are 1.6 billion Muslims. There are 15 million Jews, right? Let's just put the numbers on the table, okay? And like I said to Emily, it must be a scary time to be a Jewish person right now when even celebrating Hanukkah on a beach in Sydney, I've been to that beach, Bondi Beach. It's one of the most fun, positive, entertaining places to be anywhere in the world. The sun always shines, the families always play. And then suddenly, utter carnage with a father and son dressed like paramilitaries, just using shotguns to cold-bloodedly murder a Holocaust survivor, a 10-year-old girl, and so on. So let's just start by calling out how despicable this was on every level, and yet how typical of ISIS and groups like it, the radicalized Islamist extremists who've been doing this for a long time. For the last 20 years, they've been doing this stuff. And it's a horrible throwback to that. So yes, we can talk about the war, and it's not irrelevant, but I do think we need to put this in some perspective, which is these kind of attacks on Jewish people were going on way before the war started.
Can I address a few of the things that you said previously?
Yeah.
I don't think the alarm is about Muslims migrating to America. I think the alarm is about assimilation. I don't think that these two individuals in Bondi represent what I've been told is actually 2 billion Muslims. But when I talk to people, and I've really been trying to understand and explore this issue, whether it's Gad Saad or it's Patrick Bet-David, when I talk to people, they'll tell you, yeah, let's say 90%. And I've looked at Pew Research, I've looked at the Global Terror Database. That's a conservative number, right? 90% of Muslims are peaceful and lovely and amazing. But if 10% wants to bring down the West, you're looking at a heck of a lot of people. You're looking at like 200 million people. So what do you do about that? And yes, there are amazing heroes like the man who tried to stop them. But guys, when you look at the fact that there have been 64,000 terror attacks since 9/11 that were committed by radical Islam, 243,000 people died in those terror attacks. And you're saying all religions, I mean, not really. not really. I've started to read the Quran, and there's a duality there, unquestionably, but there's a lot in there about, kill and subjugate the infidels. So, Cenk, you're a good faith actor. I think.
Have you ever read the Old Testament?
I'm being honest with you.
Have you ever read the Old Testament? It's about slaughtering
Cenk,
all the other tribes. And in fact,
no
Netanyahu quotes it and says, do like we did to the Amalekites, kill their women and children. There are sick religious fundamentalists, and unfortunately, they're Jewish settlers and the Israeli government. They're the sickest extremists in religion on the whole planet.
And I understand you. I understand Gaza, okay? And I see both sides of that, absolutely. And you've made great points to me, and I've listened to you, and I've changed my position on how I feel that the Israeli government has behaved over there. But what I'm trying to tell you simply is that when people are Islamophobic, as I've explored this, I do think they are, and what I think they're afraid of is an ideology that is not in alignment with the West. And it's not the vast majority of Muslims. But when it's, let's say, 10%, it's still a lot of people. These are statistics.
Okay, let me bring in Mujahid. Let me hang on.
That's an outrageous number.
Let me bring in Mujahid to respond.
Research
let me bring in
Mujahid.
Let me bring in Mujahid to respond to that. Mujahid.
All right.
Ahmed is a 43-year-old Muslim fruit vendor who, unarmed, decided to bum rush one of the terrorists, disarmed him, took the gun while he was being shot at. Was shot twice. I didn't realize this at first when I saw that amazing video, but then I later saw that he was shot twice. He held off the other shooter, and he saved lives. In Germany, in March, there was a deranged Saudi national who, by the way, became radicalized by AfD and this type of white nationalism and ended up hating Islam. He rammed a truck in a terrorist attack through a crowd. You know who stopped him? A Pakistani Muslim cab driver in Germany stopped him. When there was an attack on Jews in France a couple of years ago, there was an African black immigrant who protected them. This is the story of an individual who decided to lean into empathy and decency and compassion and squared off against two individuals who were radicalized, we don't know how, and saw Jews as the target through their dehumanization. There are 1.7 billion Muslim people on Earth. Jillian's talking points are from 2001, which is why I yawned. The DeLorean right now is in 2025. Listen, I've been in this for a long time, Jillian. I know you're just discovering this. Congratulations.
I think I've also...
Let me just finish. Okay, I let you say a lot of hateful, stupid, reckless things about Muslim Islam. I sat there and...
Would you like to say one?
I just sat there...
That's 20 million people.
Jillian, you
still
by
have
your own
16
admission,
dead,
you by your own admission are a white nationalist. You by your own admission, that's what you are, a white nationalist. You admitted it.
I'm a white I'm Arab, right?
The number one
Syrian and Lebanese and Turkish.
Okay, you're the one who said it. I didn't say it. That's why I was shocked.
When did I say I was a white nationalist?
You're not a white nationalist?
When was that?
There was a... Okay, wasn't there a clip that saying you were a white nationalist? You're not a white nationalist.
No.
Okay, interesting. Interesting to know. All right.
Where's the clip that I said I was a white nationalist?
I'm under the mistaken impression. I thought you were a white nationalist. I'm glad you're not. But let me just finish. Okay. Since 2001, Pierce, you and I on this panel. You and I on this panel. How about a little homework,
Wajahat? How about just a little?
All right, let's do homework. Let's do homework. Since 2001, Pierce, since 2001, you and me, we were against the war on terror. We said that the war on terror would be disastrous. We said that the war on terror, America's response to 19 foreign hijackers bringing down the two towers would be would cause immense chaos, dissension. What happened? America went to war with Iraq and Afghanistan off of terrible evidence, off of the same type of bullshit that Jillian's saying right now. If even 1% of Muslims, yada, yada, yada. What happened?
It's over all fact-based.
1 million
you want me to
Iraqis
cite the resources?
Over 1 million Iraqis were killed. Just, Jillian, let me finish. Over 1 million Iraqis were killed.
Counterterrorism discourse intelligence estimate.
And it led to the radicalization
of
ISIS.
Court of Human Rights.
It brought nothing but pain and misery and division. Muslims, Jews aren't going anywhere, folks. We're in this together. And what we have to realize is that there are hate mongers who seek to divide us right now, like Jillian, who want to bring up Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. Who want to get rid of all Muslim immigrants.
All Wajahat, you're
no
the
one is
actually
going to leave.
Who has tried to divide us. And your
we have
rant
to
this
make
past
a future
week.
Together. We have to call out the hate. We have to call out the white supremacy, the Islamic extremism, the Jewish supremacy.
How do you address?
We have to call out the terrorism. We have to call out
the people that want to destroy the West.
We have to call out Israel's occupation. We have to call it Israel's occupation and genocide, and we have to call out Hamas
the percentage
and violent extremism
of radical Islam that wants to destroy the West.
Let me bring in Roland.
Just tell me how to address that.
Let me bring in Roland. Let me bring in Roland.
Piers,
you don't have an answer, do you?
Piers, Jillian, I've had to sit here and listen to y'all go back and forth. Can I please make this point?
Please.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Piers.
Yes.
Last week I was in Montgomery, Alabama, for the 7th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott. And there is a National Memorial for Peace and Justice and Legacy Museum there that documents, that commemorates the documented 4,400 lynchings in this country. And there were more that took place. As an African American, when I understand what it means when you have a people who have a bullseye on their back, who are being targeted, I understand that. And so it is absolutely shameful that you cannot be at a Hanukkah celebration and it gets interrupted by mass violence because of two evil individuals. But I'm saying two evil individuals for a reason. Because under the legitimate FBI leadership of Christopher Wray, they said that the greatest threat in America is white domestic terrorism. So when I listen to people like Senator Tommy Tuberville talk about, getting rid of all Muslims in this country, as an African American, I then say, what about white Christians? Because when we look at violence in this country, mass shootings in this country, who typically commits them? And so I think anybody has to be very careful to not go down this path of, oh my God, all of them, when I, as an African American, who's also, Jillian, please allow me to finish. When I, as an African American, who's also a Christian, can literally look at the history of white Christians committing violence. And so what we cannot do is say, oh, it is the religion that's driving it, as opposed to it is these evil individuals. Piers, you properly talked about guns and how Australia, after that mass shooting, you said in the 90s, how they targeted. But the fact that they were successful should be a lesson to America. How about you also try that to deal with mass shootings in this country? And so it is wrong for us to go down this path of condemning an entire religion, condemning an entire group of people, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Jewish, whether they are Christian. What we have to recognize is there are evil people in this world, and our job is to root out evil and then how they impact people. But it's crazy to attack an entire religion and target all those people.
I agree with that. And look, Emily made the same point earlier because we were talking about it.
Senator Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah, but Emily.
Randy Fine.
Emily, here's the reality about.
Guys.
Here's the reality about United States, for example. You have roughly the same number of Jews and Muslims in the United States. It's about 4 or 5 million of each, right? In the UK, by comparison, there are as many Muslims in the UK as there are in the whole of America, but there are only 250,000 Jews. There's a massively disproportionate scenario in my country, which is why I think Jews in the UK and in London in particular feel particularly threatened when they see these large marches every weekend with people often brazenly taunting the Jewish community, or supporting Hamas or talking about a global intifada, whatever it may be. And we saw the same thing happening in Australia. And I do think it's really incumbent on governments that they have to clamp down on this openly threatening stuff in the streets towards Jewish people.
Yeah, Piers, first of all, I want to thank you for your empathy, but I also, I hate this whole narrative. Like, I don't view myself as a Jew, as a this, as a black, as a Muslim. That's all identity politics. I don't want to be looked at like the victim. Jews are not the victims. We're actually a very successful, thriving demographic. Okay, if you want to be a victim, you're entitled to do so. I'm going to speak for myself.
Say I'm an African American, not a victim.
Roland,
I'm actually an African American.
Let us speak.
Good for you. Play the victim. Go ahead. I don't care.
It's not. You can actually see that.
Let her finish her point.
Oh my God, Roland, you're a victim. Are you happy? You're a victim. Great. So secondly, I actually never thought I would say this. It's hard to agree with Cenk and Wajahat when they utter so much BS, but they made really great points and I wrote them down. Cenk calls out the Old Testament for commanding to slaughter your enemies. That's why when anyone says the Quran or the word Muslim, I swap it with Torah or Jew. Argument failed, it doesn't work. The same way we're the chosen people argument doesn't work. So we need to get better arguments than that. You cannot say because the Quran says it, all Muslims are bad. If you feel that way, go to the UAE, go to Riyadh, go to Saudi Arabia, any place in Saudi Arabia, you will come home and you will understand that there is mainly like peaceful, secular, intelligent Muslims. And I know that wasn't your point, Jillian. You were not saying all Muslims are bad. You were saying
said
there's
the vast
10%.
majority are peaceful, amazing people. What I'm trying to explain
which is why I'm going to bring this point home. Jillian, I'm getting there. So to bring this point home, the point is good or bad, it doesn't matter. Take the religion out of it. I'm with Roland on this point. I could agree with everyone on this panel that we judge people by people. And it sounds so simple, right? But here's where we can take actionable measures to prevent this from happening again. This is an immigration problem, okay? I don't care if you're a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, or an atheist. If you're coming to a country and you will not contribute / assimilate to this society, slap whatever religion you want onto it, that is the government's job to ensure that you will not come to this country and ruin it. If it happens to be Muslim, so be it. If that's a Jew, so be it. By the way, I'll point out, it's usually not the Jews that have the problem with assimilating.
But the problem, Emily, the problem
nobody's going anywhere.
The problem with this is this. If you look at this father and son, for example, just the early reports coming out about them, the father had been there many years in Australia. He was a member of a shooting club. He seems to have assimilated perfectly fine, right? His son's 5. His son's in his mid-20s. His son had.
Missed a detail.
Wait a minute.
I missed a detail.
Sorry. Here's the reality. And the son had some dealings with some bad people. The government has phrased it. But not to the degree that caused them undue concern. Now, it may be in the proper investigation that now ensues that will be seen to be a mistake. It may also be that if that's viewed a mistake, to then allow his father to have 6 legally owned firearms in a country where that's very unusual was also a mistake. So there may well be an expose here of some serious failures of the process, because it seems on the face of it madness. If you've got the kid hanging out with some people who may be potentially radicalizing him, and you've got the father with 6 guns, that's not a good cocktail. But it doesn't change.
I agree. And Pierce, you present your question also to the other panelists. You present it as 2 extremes. It's either, well, you could ban all the Muslims, but then you won't get Ahmed al-Ahmed, or why is it this or that?
Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. I'm just saying to you
Emily,
that examining the assimilation of people is not as easy as it sounds, right? If it was, nobody would slip through the net.
Emily, you're speaking from both sides of your mouth. You talk about you want a middle, you say no one's going back, but you also are perfectly fine with blaming immigrants and sending them back. Listen, I have to defend immigrants here, all right? And let me use Emily's own logic, and let me use Jill's own logic. Number 1 domestic terror threat in America consistently, and this is a fact, has been radical right and white supremacist terrorism. That's a fact. We do not... And I have not, Roland hasn't, Cenk hasn't said, you know what, radicalize all white people.
But what statistics are
Jillian, just let me finish, and then you could say
Jillian,
yourself.
it came from the FBI director, Christopher Wray.
I'm just curious, I'm not Christian.
The FBI
I believe that figure. I believe that figure.
Director.
No, I'm going to check. I'm going to get that checked in real time. Hang on.
All right.
I'm going to check it in real time.
I actually am curious. I'm asking honestly.
My understanding of that claim
the Department of Justice
is that is true. But I will get it double-checked
while we're
talking. I'll get it double-checked, but my understanding is that is a true statement of fact.
The Department of Justice
just
removed it from their website.
But let Wajahat finish his point. Please don't all talk over each other. Wajahat.
Yeah, so let me just finish, Jillian, and then you can come in and interfere and do what you want, all right? Neither me, Cenk, or Roland has ever said, do onto white men what was done onto Muslims and black people and what's being done unto Somalis, the racial profiling, the excessive demonization, kicking them all out, blaming all white people for the sins of white Christian nationalists or neo-Nazis or white supremacists, all right? The person who tried to assassinate Donald Trump, twice, 2 people did it, white men. The person who killed Charlie Kirk, allegedly a white man. The number one identity of mass shooters in America, want to take a guess? White men. Number one identity of child pedophiles, white men.
Ooh,
I have never said kick out all white people, racially profile white people, dehumanize white people. What you are doing is saying, if it's a Muslim, let's engage in Islamophobia. Let's demonize them. Let's hate them. Jillian, I know you're new to this. This has been happening for 25 years.
Let me ask you. Okay, but Wajahat, let me ask you a question.
Increased anti-Americanism.
Let me ask you. Wait a minute, Wajahat. Wajahat, a serious question. There are a lot of Muslim extremists. You'd accept that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And I've condemned it on your show.
I don't know the exact number. You don't. Gillian doesn't, right? But
it's not even close when it comes to American terrorism. It's not even close.
The point she's making is comparison to the total number of Jews on the planet. There are 1.6 to 2 billion Muslims, right? You only need a small number of those to be radicalized, to be extremist, and you will start to see a lot of bad stuff happening.
What I'm trying to say is
if you use that same logic here. So my question is, my question, Wajahat, for you is what does the Muslim community do to root out these extremists in their midst?
Right.
Well, okay, I'm going to flip it.
Understanding.
No.
By the way, everything you said, any white person who's committed such an atrocity should obviously go to jail for the rest of their life.
What has Jillian done to root out white mass shooters in America? Jillian, what have you done to root out and de-radicalize the white men in your community who are responsible for the #1 mass shooting in this country?
I would condemn and call it out, and I would, if I was on a jury, I would absolutely
No, what have you done?
vote for them to go to prison. I'm also not
that
doing anything
to
go after radical Muslims. I'm trying to condemn all violence and form some common ground with you here, where radicalism across the board should be condemned. But I think what you're not understanding is when people are concerned, they're concerned, as far as I can tell, about assimilation. And in all the conversations that I have had about this, they are worried, like, hey, if it's 2 radical Muslims and 1 good guy, how are we going to keep the 2 radicals out? And if you've got, let's say, 1% of 2 billion people that want to bring down the West, like, what do you do about chance of death to America and Dearborn? This is what I'm saying. Like, what do you say about that?
I keep hearing assimilation. Piers, I keep hearing assimilation. And again, this is the point which you're making. You keep saying assimilation, that is the answer. Again, what happens when people who are born here, who were brought here in chains, and their ancestors and their folks are here, and you still are dealing with white domestic terrorism? Is that assimilation? See, this is the problem. Y'all somehow think that assimilation, that's going to be the answer. That's not. That is not the answer.
Well,
and so it's nonsensical to think so.
Well, it depends what you mean. I mean, look, let me
thrive in America.
Let them define assimilation.
Let me bring in Cenk here.
I'll define it.
Let me bring in Cenk.
I'll define it. It's not chanting death to America. It's loving America, wanting to pursue the American dream.
It's also not participating in a violent insurrection.
That's kind of the answer, in my opinion.
Can I say something, please, to Cenk? So, Cenk, this word assimilation, what it really means to me, at its purest, is that if you come to, say, the United States or the UK or Australia from another country, particularly another country which has a very different culture. So say you come from the Middle East and you come to live in America, live in London, live in Sydney, whatever. The word assimilate means that you do your best to be part of the new culture you're joining. What you don't do is put a drawbridge up and start your own culture within the culture of the country you go to at the expense of that nation's culture. I mean, at its purest...
That's not true!
Well, that is true.
Okay, if what you just described is the case, then the Italians, the Jewish, the Polish, every group that came to the United States did exactly what you just said. They had own communities, own culture. So, do you understand the history of America?
Yes, and I also understand that in the
UK. And what you described?
Well, I don't remember the Italians in America setting up their own rival court system, for example, unless I missed it.
Muslims haven't either.
No. Because in the UK, we now have nearly 100 Sharia courts have been set up. Okay?
Yeah.
So I don't remember that happening with any of the Poles or the Italians in the United States. That's what I'm talking about. Cenk.
Okay. All right. So what I can't stand is the double standards. So if, for example, Jillian said, what if 10% Muslims are violent? Okay. If you said that about Jewish people and you said, look, I'm not worried about most Jews, but, if 10% of Jews are treacherous and serve Israel first and betray their country. Hold on. No, Jillian. Now you let me talk.
Gaza?
Okay? No, you let me talk. No. Okay. So now, if you said 10% of Jews are the real problem, everyone would be outraged, and rightfully so. That's not the right thing to say. But people say it blithely about Muslims, like we don't count, and it's no big deal to discriminate against us. Now let's talk about immigration. You fill out forms. If some idiot fills out a form and says, I'm for ISIS, I'm for Muslim extremism, and you don't want to let him into the country, of course you don't let him into the country. But now we're talking about Muslims at large. Wait, that's a totally different thing. By the way, are we doing the same thing for Israelis? Are we having them fill it? Hold on. Are we asking them to fill out a form? Are you against murdering 20,000 Palestinian kids? And if they say, no, I am for it, and I like what Israel did, are we banning them because they're sick, violent extremists who don't mind the murder of 20,000 children? No, of course not. In fact, when you look at the forms right now, what we're asking in entering our country is, what are your views about Israel? Who gives a damn what their views about Israel are when they're coming to America? Why are we asking about a different country? What I care most about is American sovereignty. Now, Roland is right. Muslims come here, Jews come here, Italians, etc. We all assimilate to some degree. I love the Pittsburgh Steelers. My favorite food is subs, etc. And I'm sure that's true of Jews, Christians, everyone, right? But we also keep a part of our culture. And if we said to, again, Jewish people, like we're saying to Muslims, how dare you not assimilate? What's with the silly hat and the stupid little things and the things coming out of your pockets? Why don't you assimilate? The real problem is the Jews. And they're too, hold on. And they're too loyal to Israel. And that's the real problem. They will not assimilate. All they care about is Israel. Everyone would say you're an unacceptable anti-Semite and you should be canceled forever.
Listen,
I've got to about Muslims.
Okay, listen, I've got to wrap the debate. But what I would say, though, is there should be lines that we can all agree to draw. One is if you chant global intifada, everybody knows what that means. There have been 2 intifadas in the last 30-odd years, and they were both extremely violent. So when people call for that and chant about it...
How about the violence of the occupation?
Okay.
They are uprising against a brutal fascist occupation for 58 brutal terrorist years. But you never talk about the Israeli violence in the same way. When Israelis get together,
I've regularly criticized
occupy the Palestinians, enslave them,
I've regularly criticized it. I've regularly criticized it, but when you allow...
That's not the debate we have in America.
When you allow, as Australia and England have done, to allow mass demonstrations, pro-Palestinian, where people chant global intifada or death to the IDF or wave the Hamas insignia, that to me all crosses a line. That's an incitement to violence.
Can we be like the
Israeli
Australian Jewish community?
The line.
Wait, can I just say this to end on a positive note?
Yeah.
Like the Australian Jewish community, when they were given the opportunity to dehumanize Muslims and Palestinians, did you see what they did? They said, we're not going to do that. We're only going to blame the 2 shooters. And we're in this together. Yeah. Be like that, folks. Don't be like Jillian and Emily and try to go against Muslims and immigrants and all this nonsense and divide and conquer. We're all in this together.
Immigrants all rise to the table, and this is how these debate. The fact that you have to straw man arguments and put words in people's mouths shows that you have no
has been blaming other religions.
You call me a white nationalist. You have no idea what you're talking about.
I must say, Wajahat, I've heard of some curious ways of ending on a positive note. That was not one of them.
But no, that's an Ahmed.
I've got to leave it there. I've got to leave it. It's hard to think of a less positive note you left it on than hammering 2 of your co-panelists, but we'll leave it there. I actually think what they said in Australia was a good thing, and we should all strive to be unifying forces and not polarising forces. We started this with Donald Trump's comments on Rob Reiner. How nice it would have been if Donald Trump had come out and and paid tribute to Rob Reimer, the filmmaker, because I bet he's loved his films, rather than trashing him on a human level, which I just thought crossed a line. We all, I think, know where a lot of lines are that shouldn't be crossed. And we've got to come together and make sure nobody crosses them. Then life will slowly start to improve from this toxic hell we're currently infested with. Anyway, thank you all very much.